Hi, it's Lara here with your weekly astrology video. This one is for the week of February 10th to 16th, 2021. Thanks for being here. So we're going to talk all about this really exciting new moon that's coming up on Thursday in the sign of Aquarius. And it is very, very potent. So I have a lot to say about that. So I hope you stick around till the end. And as per usual, and by usual, I mean as for the last month or so, every time I do one of these videos, I've been giving you some, question prompts kind of thing, just questions to think about and even to journal on, in relation to whatever the event is that I'm talking about in the video. And in this case, that's going to be the new moon in Aquarius. So I'm going to do that again this time around, and hopefully you're finding that, helpful to reflect on those questions. So if you want to, pause and grab a notebook or something, you can, or you can just kind of think about it as I'm talking about it as well. But before we get there, and before we get through going through all the signs, we'll talk about, this new moon and some really interesting connections between this new moon and a new moon that happened way back in the early 60s. Just to give some context, right? And a bit of sort of something to ponder in relation to where we're at right now. So, and then a couple other things to mention before I even get there. So we've got the moon in Aquarius right now. So we're kind of starting to feel that energy, right? Although she's in her dark phase as I'm recording this, she won't be new until February 11th at around 2:05 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time. So you can adjust accordingly. And then as the moon starts to grow, that's when it's a really good time to sort of begin taking the first steps, right? And to really kind of plant those seeds or those intentions. Like, you can definitely start thinking about it and kind of doing the background work. But in terms of taking any sort of outward action, it's usually best to wait until, well, really until you see that first sliver of new moon, but at least until the moon is new, right? And I just gave you the details for that. So new moon, 23 degrees Aquarius at 2:05 p.m. Eastern time. And that's happening on the 11th. And something else that's happening on that exact day is that Venus and Jupiter are coming into an exact conjunction. And that's about, they're hitting exact about 4 hours or so before the new moon. So those two events are happening, right on top of each other. And that's really quite exciting and optimistic in many ways. Venus and Jupiter. So last week we talked about Venus and Saturn coming together, right? If you watched last week's video, and that it was a bit of a downer in some ways, but it was real. It was a dose of realism for you. And as I mentioned to you in that video, that I have that exact aspect in my natal chart. So I can kind of be a bit self-deprecating about it because it hits close to home. But Venus and Saturn it's a bit ouchy and uncomfortable and somber and not warm fuzzies kind of thing. Although it has some really good qualities, like I mentioned, about the sense of loyalty and stick-to-itiveness and really being in it for the long haul and eventually being able to create something really solid and long lasting. But we are coming out of that situation because Venus is moving along, right? Saturn moves much more slowly. And Venus on this day of the new moon is hitting her conjunction with Jupiter. And this is considered, just like Venus, Saturn is one of the most difficult aspects in astrology. This is one of the most, if not the most benefic aspect, because it's the two benefic planets, right? The two planets that bring us good fortune and, the good things in life are coming together and meeting up in the sky. So of course, I don't want to paint this picture that it's like all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, because there's always a flip side, right? You hear me say this all the time. Things are on a continuum. There is a yin and a yang to the energy. And so it can be kind of too much of a good thing. Like over the top spending, say, or like huge grand gestures of love. Valentine's is coming up, for example. And just going like over the top, and maybe it not landing like you you would have hoped, or you broke the bank on whatever expenditure, or those kinds of things. But in general, really, really nice energy, nice harmonious energy coming together. So that is this hit of optimism and luck and benevolence right around the time of this new moon. And we also have Mercury retrograde in a trine, a supportive conversation with the nodes of the moon. And we've got Saturn within 1 degree of its first square to Uranus, right? Which is coming exact next week on the 17th. So that's a little bit of a I don't want to fly in the ointment. I don't know if that's a great analogy, but it's a little bit of discomfort, of prickliness, of like sudden kind of upheaval. Like it's a jolt, right? And then Mercury retrograde just passed its exact square to Mars. So we're just coming through that. But, aside from the Jupiter-Venus thing that's going on, I really, what I want to focus on is this new moon, because it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So this new moon, I'm going to show you the chart right now, just to give you a visual, because I think that'll really kind of solidify it for you, give you some context. So here's the new moon, right? 2:05, February 11th, 2:05 Eastern. And just check out this lineup of planets in Aquarius. The sun and the moon, of course, because a new moon is always when the sun and the moon come together to birth something new. There they are at 23 Aquarius. And then there is Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn, all there in Aquarius. Asteroid Pallas is there as well, but I didn't put her on here. And so that is a whole lot of energy going on in Aquarius. 6 planets in Aquarius. And down here, we have Uranus, Lilith, and Mars in Taurus still making that square, right? That's a long-term thing going on. So those are really the pieces. Like, that's really what I want to draw your attention to. You can see Venus and Jupiter are both at 12 degrees at the time of the new moon, so they're conjunct. And, Saturn's kind of hanging back there in the earlier degrees. And Mercury retrograde is right there between the Jupiter-Venus conjunction and the Sun-Moon conjunction. So that's kind of interesting, because Mercury is the messenger, right? And so it's like Mercury is kind of going back and forth between the planets and kind of, getting the messages and the information and going back and forth. And what do you think about this? And here, this is what so-and-so said. And, and kind of like, almost like bringing things together in a sense, and doing a lot of, because Mercury's retrograde, doing a lot of this sort of behind the scenes communications and chit chat and information gathering and that sort of thing, right? That's going on. So when Mercury stations direct next week, we may get some further clarity in terms of what all this is about. Like right now, it can feel a little bit scattered. And it's just like that area of your chart, wherever Aquarius is for you, which we've talked about quite a bit already, because Aquarius is a big feature of 2021. So, we've talked about that already, but I'm going to talk about it again later on in the video. But it's like, there could be this real sense of like busyness, chaos, scatteredness all over the place, you know, too much to kind of do and consider and think about, too many factors at play. But this new moon, you know, Jupiter or Venus Jupiter conjunction, and then Mercury's going to station direct next week. The sun's going to move into Pisces next week. We're going to have a little bit of a disbursement starting to happen of that energy, and being able to kind of go, okay, you know, here was this like sort of tight ball of everything, and now it's like, okay, we're going to start to kind of, you know, spread out a little bit, and things might start to feel a little bit more like less kind of concentrated, if you will, in that one area. But let's talk. So I showed you the chart, and I showed you that big lineup of planets. So the last time we had this kind of thing going on in Aquarius was in 1962. We had a new moon, which was not only a new moon, but it was an eclipse on February 5th, 1962. And all those planets were in Aquarius, plus Mars was in Aquarius. So we have 6 planets in Aquarius at this new moon. And back in 1962, it was 7 planets because Mars was there. In this case, Mars is still kind of is aspecting this new moon by sign, at least because Mars is over there in Taurus, right, making a square. So Mars is still kind of a factor. So we had an eclipse February 5th. Like I said, it was a total solar eclipse too. So that's amplified even more so, right? At 15 degrees Aquarius. And then later that year, August 15th, there was a lunar eclipse in Aquarius at 22 degrees. So within 1 degree of where this new moon is happening. You know, and there were less planets. There were only Saturn and the moon in Aquarius at that point, with the sun obviously across the sky in Leo because it was a lunar eclipse, right? So full moon. So what I thought would be interesting is to take a look back at some of the things that happened in 1962, to give you kind of this idea of how energies sort of repeat themselves, right? So, yeah, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to circle back to talking a little bit more about the current new moon and where we're at, and then launch into the signs. So what happened in 1962? Honestly, when I looked, when I did some research, I was kind of floored because like it just went on and on and on and on and on. 1962 was a pretty busy year on the world stage. It's kind of crazy. You can go have a look yourself. So I just kind of cherry picked a few things out. And there was so much more than this, but just a few things to kind of give you an indication, right? So I'm going to go down my list. Jackie Robinson was the first African-American elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And if I meant to look this up, but I forgot to, if memory serves me, you know, I'm not the best at sports trivia, admittedly, but I think Jackie Robinson just died recently. I could be wrong. Correct me if you know. But so that happened. Then there was the whole thing with the U.S. and Cuba, right? So JFK banned trade with Cuba, and then eventually there was the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs, and all of that occurred. We had the call for Algerian independence by Charles de Gaulle. There was Jamaica gained independence from Britain. Rwanda and Burundi gained independence from Belgium. Jackie Kennedy, right? First Lady, hosted a TV tour of the White House. So first time that had happened. And the U.S. sent John Glenn, astronaut, into space, right? So the first astronaut into orbit. And one thing I thought was kind of interesting about this, was that he was on a space capsule that was called Friendship 7 specifically. And I thought that was really interesting because, Aquarius is the sign of friendship, right? So that's quite interesting. There were anti-war rallies and the organizing of the first anti-nuclear march. There was the U.S. Supreme Court banned race separation on public transport. The United Nations World Food Program held its first session. JFK gave an address to Congress in which he formally addressed the issue of consumer rights. JFK, again, lots going on, right? It was the Kennedy years. JFK signed an executive order maintaining the right of federal employees to join unions and negotiate on many issues. There was a laser successfully bounced off the moon. The first hovercraft was tested. The Rolling Stones gave their first performance. Ringo Starr replaced Pete Best as the drummer for the Beatles, and the Beatles had their first recording session. Bob Dylan released his first album. The Nobel Prize for Medicine and Physiology was awarded to 2 doctors for their work in determining the double helix molecular structure of DNA. There was the first successful gender reassignment surgery performed. This person went from female to male. There were a multitude of iconic works of literature and art and music, like too many to name. You can go look them up yourself. This one I had to throw in there. An astrologer named Jean Dixon told Ronald Reagan that he would someday be president. And then, interestingly enough, the Reagans are famous for having an astrologer, Joan Quigley, advise them in the White House. So interesting. The American Nazi Party was declared an enemy of the state. So when I read this, I thought interesting because that's similar to what happened with the Proud Boys in Canada here recently. Crayola crayons adopted the name peach to replace the color flesh. There was the invention of the first communication satellite, the LED light bulb, and the first personal computer. Indigenous Australians gained the right to vote. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So to sum it up, there was an explosion of civil rights movements, anti-war and independence movements, social and political unrest, arts and culture, space and innovation. All of this just kind of exploded. It was the launch of the 60s, right? The 60s counterculture movement. But also the backlash to all of that, because that is Aquarius, right? We've talked about Aquarius a lot in past videos. So if you didn't hear those videos and the sort of deeper dive we did into Aquarius, then that would be a good idea when I talked about Aquarius season. So, because Aquarius, just to remind you, is this fixed air sign. So can be very sort of dogmatic in its ideas and ideals, right? Very set in its ways, in a sense, even though Aquarius is associated with futuristic and visionary thinking and, thinking outside the box, innovation, all of this kind of thing. It's also a fixed sign. So very kind of set, right? Difficult to move. And Aquarius traditionally is ruled by the planet Saturn, and Saturn also rules Capricorn, right? So there's this sense of like the old battling the new, the breaking away of the old, of the new from the old. There is this sense of pushing boundaries, but there's also the backlash of that, and people thinking that their way is the way, sort of thing. So all of that is going on, right? It happened in the 60s, and we can see it doesn't take, too much, really, like it's not much of a stretch to just take a look around at what's happening in the world, and you can see that we are really sort of in a very similar place. So I mentioned to you, next week we've got, and I'll talk about all this next week, but I'm just kind of giving you a heads up because there's some big stuff going on in February, as I've mentioned before. So next week we have the first exact Saturn-Uranus square, although they're very close together already. And this is an energy, as I've mentioned before, which is really a signature for the whole year, but it will reach these sort of crescendos on and off 3 times exactly over the course of 2021, right? That Saturn-Uranus square. And it's like this, again, break from the old, or the clash of the old and the new, in a sense, of this trying to like, this kind of bit of like this tension, this friction, this something's got to give energy between the old and new, between tradition and innovation, you know, that kind of thing. And when we have a square, the idea is to work it out, right? It's like, it's not necessarily about kind of like cutting things off completely. It's about working out that tension and that friction, giving it a place to go, being creative about the solutions. And then we also have, like I said, the sun's entering Pisces, and then we've got Venus coming into a square with Mars and Mercury stationing direct, all happening next week. But I thought I'd just mention that now. So let's go back to talk a little bit more about this new moon. So like all new moons, right? The sun and the moon come together to birth something new. There's this sense of like planting seeds. And when I think of that analogy in relation to this new moon and this, what we call stellium of planets in Aquarius, right? This collection of planets. It's like, what came to mind was like, it's like, we're not just planting seeds. This is like Jack's magic beans, right? Jack and the beanstalk. I'm sure you know that story, but it's like planting the magic beans for the future, and, you know, going up into the clouds. And what are we going to find up there? Maybe it's not all going to be what we imagined. You know, who knows, kind of thing. Or it's like, if you want to use another analogy, it's like pouring Miracle Grow on your seeds, right? And so you're giving them that boost, and to make them strong and healthy and vital. But if you pour too much, there's such a thing as too much of a good thing, right? And there can be that sense of revolution for revolution's sake when we have all this Aquarius energy. And in fact, something like this phrase came to mind that I saw it online somewhere, and I don't think there was actually an actual sort of name attached to it. So forgive me if I'm not giving credit where credit is due, but it sticks in my head. And it's like, there's a fine line between rebellion and self-sabotage. So I think that's something to kind of like keep on the back burner, keep in our back pockets during this time, because it is very much a time where, yes, rebellion in many ways is called for, but not to the point of sabotaging ourselves and the collective, right? Aquarius is the sign of the collective, the group, very much about, you know, humanitarian causes, about what's good for everyone, not just the individual. But also taking into account that, you know, every individual has something worthwhile and unique to contribute to the group, right? So it's that interplay. But I just think, you know, there's a fine line between rebellion and self-sabotage is something that we might want to keep in mind during this time. So, but you know, like I gave you that analogy of Jack's magic beans or the Miracle Grow, and that's really the flavor of this new moon in a lot of ways. So I just want to kind of go back to setting things up a little. And, you know, we had that great conjunction in December of 2020 at the solstice, right? The great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then please go back and listen to that video because it's hugely important and relevant. The Great Conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn at the beginning of Aquarius has flipped the switch on a new 200-year cycle. And, you know, if you want to make it more kind of personal, it's also a new 20-year cycle. So that's important to keep in mind. And we're moving it out of this heavier material energy of earth and into the energy of air. And, you know, so we are being called to kind of embrace the qualities of air and think about air in all its forms. You know, I was listening to, I think it was an episode of the astrology podcast recently where they were talking about, I think it was Austin Coppock. He always has the best analogies that really resonate with me. But he was talking, I think, about this whole notion of birds, right? Like, and comparing like the Aquarian energy to birds and flocks and how they move together and come apart. And, you know, that's Aquarian. That's very Aquarian in nature. So anyway, that's, you know, we had this great conjunction and it sort of, it set the stage, right? It kind of flipped the switch. And then we had the new moon in Capricorn on January 13th. So I was using the analogy in my head of, I have a cat trying to escape the room here. She's going to have to wait. But I was using the analogy or thought of the analogy in my head of like, if you've ever been to like a major concert in a big stadium or even an outdoor venue, you know, like a big show of some description. Maybe one day we'll be allowed to do that again. But think about it like this, right? So the Great Conjunction, it's like, you know, the roadies and whatever are setting things up, right? The lights are you know, flipped on and that kind of thing. And then we had the new moon in Capricorn. And so it's like we, you know, bought our tickets and entered the stadium. And people are kind of, you know, looking for their friends and maybe like, you know, getting their snacks and, you know, whatever. Or like parking their car, doing all those strategic things, you know, you do. And then we had the full moon in Leo. And that was on the 28th, right? So the last full moon we had. And so that was like, we took our seats and we're getting quite excited, you know, about and anticipating the show. And now the band launches into their first song, right? You hear that first like chord on the guitar and like all the lights go on and everybody starts, you know, yelling. That's where we're at. That's the new moon in Aquarius. That's the analogy. You know, I like music. And anyway, so that works for me. There's other analogies I could come up with. You know, it could be like a sporting event too, or I'm sure you can think of any number of things on your own, but it's kind of that process that we've been in since the, you know, the end of 2020. And it's kind of like, you can feel things building. You can feel the anticipation building and the sense of excitement, but also kind of like trepidation maybe too, you know, like, okay. So like, I cannot remember what year it was in, but my husband and I years ago went to see David Bowie open for 9 Inch Nails. And it was weird. It was very Aquarian. And we had like second row seats. I was literally like, you know, like, I don't know, whatever, 10 feet away from 20 feet away max from David Bowie. And, you know, we were so excited, but the show was not what we expected. Even though like I knew 9 Inch Nails, but it wasn't Bowie true to form, right? It was, but in some ways I suppose it was, because he was always breaking the rules and doing that kind of thing. So, you know, that's sort of the flavor of this kind of, it might take a bit of adjusting to kind of go, okay, let me be open to this, right? Let me be open to this. What do I think? Like that kind of thing. So that's that gives you an idea of the flavor here that we're talking about of this new moon. So what I want to do next is I want to give you some questions to ponder. I want to, first of all, I want to say that if you have significant placements in Aquarius, and like, I mean, Aquarius is just being hit stem to stern, really, but this new moon is at the 23-degree mark. I actually have my natal Mercury in Aquarius at exactly 23 degrees. So this new moon is exactly on top of my Mercury. But if you have any planets that are around that 23-degree mark, give or take, this is going to be most potent for you, right? So Aquarius and also the other fixed signs, which are Leo, Scorpio, and Taurus. But really the fixed signs are getting, charged up with this more than, if you don't have really many or any placements in fixed signs, this may be more of like you observing what's going on around and not so much maybe feeling it personally, that kind of thing. But overall, because, Aquarius is the sign of the group, because we're in this, we're at the beginnings of this air cycle that the Great Conjunction kicked off. We're all impacted, right? It's just that at points in time, some of us may feel it more than others. And this is one of those moments where the fixed signs are really getting it. But the thing about that is it's a real opportunity to catalyze change, to alchemize things, to catalyze change, or to be the catalyst for change as well, right? Whether that is in your own life, or in, the world around you, right? In connection with the group, which ideally it's a bit of both, because we are talking about that sort of collective energy. All right. So I'm going to give you a set of questions now. Some of these, if you've listened to the past several videos, might sound a bit repetitive because we have talked about Aquarius before. And so some of these questions they come up again, right? But what I want you to know is this is an opportunity for all of us to be really planting these magic beans. And in the area of life, particularly that Aquarius encapsulates for us, which we'll get to. But it's we're not just talking about, we're planting these seeds and then, 2 weeks from now, we're going to see the fruit bear at the full moon. That's on the small scale. But this is much bigger than that. So think about these questions in relation to, okay, what do I want to see come to pass in a couple of weeks from now at the full moon? What do I want to see come to pass in 6 months from now at the time of the full moon in Aquarius? What do I want to see for my life over the next 20 years with this? Because the Great Conjunction happened in Aquarius, right? And the next one won't happen again for another 20 years. So think about it in increments kind of thing, right? And the changes that you can kind of begin and then build on and sort of grow that beanstalk and climb that beanstalk sort of thing. Weird analogy, I know. But anyways, all right. So here are some questions to ponder. And then when I take you through the signs and I speak to the specific house, you can bring these questions to that specific area of life for you. So this is an opportunity. One thing that I didn't really say yet, but I alluded to obviously, particularly when I was going through that list about what happened in 62 and the 60s in general. But it's there's this real energy of power to the people, right? Of taking back your power. And so on a personal level, you can think of that individually, where am I poised to take back my power? And that'll have to do largely with where Aquarius sits in the chart for you. So here's the questions that I have for you today. How can I take my power back in this area of life, right? Without going too far. So keeping in mind, remember I said, put it in your back pocket, just that whole idea of the fact that there's a fine line between rebellion and self-sabotage, right? So how can I take my power back in this area of life? How is this area of life calling for revolution and innovation? What information and resources do I need to help me establish this new beginning? How can my unique approach or my unique gifts best serve the collective and also me, right? That reciprocation piece. Like it's like, it's not giving it all away so you have nothing for yourself, but it's also not hoarding it all for yourself so you don't, give what you have. And when I say give it you have, like, get it out of your head that I'm just talking about like material things, because I'm not talking about that, right? We're moving out of that earth realm, that material realm. We're moving into the air realm, right? So this can be ideas and innovations and new ways of thinking and all kinds of things. We're not just talking about charity in the sense of like monetary donations, like, let's put it that way. So how can my unique approach or my gifts best serve the collective? How can I liberate myself from what's holding me back in my life? And particularly in that Aquarian area of life, right? How can I experiment without doing damage to myself and others? But how can I do things differently? Try things out. What hopes do I have for my future and for the future of humanity? And how can I take the steps to get there? And remember, we're talking about this, building on the change kind of thing. How can I capitalize on any opportunities that come my way? Or how can I make my own luck in this area? So remember, Venus and Jupiter are coming together at the time of this new moon. And so there's this potential stroke of luck involved, or this feeling of like, of love. And it's in Aquarius. So maybe more like sort of platonic love too, right? But like really wanting to kind of have that harmony. I mean, it does... I hesitate to mention this, but it does kind of bring up that whole, the age of Aquarius, this song, which really doesn't have anything to do with the age of Aquarius in astrological terms, but it's that harmony piece, harmony and understanding, that kind of thing. That's the Jupiter Venus piece of the puzzle here. All right, so next question. How can I practice a healthy level of detachment? Because Aquarius, as a fixed air sign, is they have the capacity for being the observer, right? And like not getting too bogged down in the emotion of things. And so sometimes we need that. We need that sense of emotional detachment to be able to be more objective and see things from outside our own paradigm and outside our own, mindset and that kind of thing. So how can I practice a healthy level of detachment? How can I think outside the box or use creative and innovative problem solving, right? I've mentioned this before. That's very Aquarian. What groups, people, organizations, causes do I resonate with, and how can I get more involved with those? What do I have that I can offer, or what can I glean from those? Where am I willing to stick my neck out, to take action, to get what I want, or to move towards that future vision that I have, right? And remember, Mars and Uranus are squaring Aquarius, right? Mars and Taurus. So that's kind of where that question came from. And again, I say to you, where do I want to see my life in 2 weeks, in 6 months, in 20 years from now, kind of thing. So big picture. So I think that is really, those are the questions, the main questions that I wanted to pose to you. And trying to think if there's anything else I want to mention before I start to launch into the signs. I think one thing I want to say is just that, you know, it's so important, I think, right now to really keep that sense of like being the observer, like I just mentioned to you, and really questioning our own motivations, our own attachments, you know, because sometimes we get this, like, we get so strongly attached, fixed air to our ideas and our ideals, and the way that we think things should be, that we have a hard time imagining things any other way, or we have a hard time understanding where other people are coming from. And you know, you when I was relaying all those events that happened in the 60s, you know, it wasn't just all peace, love, and rock and roll, right? That happened in the 60s, and the counterculture movement. There was an element of that, but it kind of went wrong in a lot of ways too. And I think we can learn from that. I think this is an opportunity for a bit of a do-over, and to maybe try to get it right this time. You know, like, I mean, hippies, a lot of hippies, not all hippies, but eventually, you know, turned into yuppies kind of thing, and embraced capitalism, you know, that kind of thing. So I think it's just kind of, it's an interesting thing to reflect on, and to kind of think about, you know, how can we make this stick? How can we make it, our good intentions stick? And how can we allow differing viewpoints to have, to come together and have a say without going to extremes, right? Because there is a limit. There is a limit. You know, we talked about, you know, like, I mean, I just, on the list there, when I was talking about like the American Nazi Party and being declared an enemy of the state. Yeah, because some things are not okay. No matter how you try to justify it, or you know, to no matter how you try to wrap it, or whatever, right? Some things are just not okay, and we have to be willing to stand up to that, and be willing to say, this is not okay, and, you know, I'm sorry if that's your viewpoint, but it's flawed. You know, so there's this whole balance. Like, there's an element of, yes, we have to let everybody come to the table and say their piece, and all of that, but then there also has to be this ability, this Aquarian ability to go, nope, we're cutting that off, right? Like, that's, Uranus likes to cut things off. Saturn is about the boundaries, right? Those are the co-rulers of Aquarius. So I just, I don't know why that came to my mind, and it seemed like something I needed to share. So there you go. All right, so I'm going to take you through each of the signs now, and we're going to start, as I always do, with first house, which will, in this case, will be Aquarius, because it's your new moon. And we'll go through the signs and houses, and I invite you to think about the questions, and maybe even, you know, journal on them a little bit or whatever that I pose to you, and really think about, you know, the magic beans that you're planting in this area of life. And don't get too caught up if, like, it doesn't have to be like you know all the answers right now, right? It's like, Aquarius is a sign of experimentation, so that's okay. So all right, here we go. So Aquarius, for you, obviously this is your new moon, and we are looking at you, and all the, you know, Aquarius at its best qualities kind of thing. And as an example for how to move forward into this new era that we are launched into at this point. And it's like, for you, this new moon is happening in the first house, which is about you. It is like really the most kind of important house when we're talking about the self, right? All the other houses can have an element of like, it could pertain to you, but it could also pertain to other people in your life. The first house is generally all about us, and it has to do with your personality, your body, your physical body and vitality, your mental body as well. It has to do with your appearance, your approach to life in general, how you kind of put yourself out there and present to the world, and how the world perceives you as well, right? And so this is like this huge tornado of planets going on in this area of your life. There's like this whole, like there's a personal revolution of sorts happening for you, Aquarius, particularly Aquarius rising, but if you have a lot of planets in Aquarius as well, this pertains to you. So, and I forgot to mention, of course, listen, for your rising sign, first and foremost, if you know it, but also this can pertain to your sun and your moon as well, sun and moon sign as well. But so there's a real opportunity to quite literally take back your power, Aquarius, when we're talking about yourself. And so this can be a whole new, like, you're planting some seeds that you're hoping to grow over the next 2 weeks, 6 months, 20 years, that are about the changes you're making and that your own personal evolution, on in every way. So that's huge. That's huge. Maybe you might be like, let me try to give you some practical, concrete possibilities here. So this could be things like you are completely changing your appearance. I like, this could even be situations where people are transitioning, right? I talked about in 1962 where there was the first surgery in terms of somebody switching to from female to male, so that, like, that could quite literally pertain to some people. Obviously that's unique to some, but and that's maybe an extreme example, but it's possible. Or it's like you are stepping into a completely new role in your life. You could be, this could have to do with like big changes physically for you, embarking on some kind of like something pertaining to your physical health and vitality that's going to be like long term, long lasting. It's like your whole approach to life is shifting, right? There's a fresh start in some way. So, okay, I think I've said enough there, Aquarius. You're maybe presenting yourself almost like to the world in a different way as well. So, okay, I'm going to leave that there. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below, and I'm happy to address those as well. Okay, so put them in the comments, and I'll get back to you for sure. All right, so next we have Capricorn. So Capricorn, for you, you have this big sort of personal revolution going on, and it's this opportunity to take back your power. To plant some magic beans in your second house, which has to do with, your personal resources, your finances, right? Your material possessions and belongings. I also think of personal resources as time and energy, but not just money, but that's part of it, a big part of it. Your what sustains you, what you value, your sense of self-worth. These are all second house themes, right? And so for you, Capricorn, that's where this major Aquarian energy is happening for you, and this new moon. And so this could be, just thinking on a sort of practical sense, this could be investing in Bitcoin. I don't know, like that's just what came to mind, or cryptocurrency. This could be, or something having to do with your finances and kind of like taking back your power there, or doing something in a totally new, unique, innovative way, or experimenting a little bit with that, or with even a change somehow in your value system, right? Like what you value, what you place worth on, and thinking outside the box there, and maybe looking towards the future there a little bit. Maybe something new comes along that plants some seeds that eventually grow into you having some kind of revolution in the way that in what you value. So that's those are a couple of examples for you, Aquarius. Sorry, not Aquarius, Capricorn. I'm sorry. So listen to those questions and filter them through these second house themes, and think about, not only am I planting the seeds for what I want to see grow over the next couple of weeks, but also over the next 6 months and beyond that, like over the next 20 years, right? As well. So that's for you, Capricorn. Next, we're going to move to Sagittarius. Sagittarius, for you, this Aquarius New Moon stellium energy is happening in your third house. And so this is where you're planting the magic beans, Sagittarius. It has to do with the third house encompasses a lot of different things that are all connected to the hinge of like your immediate environment, and the people in it. So third house is about your communications, so speaking, learning, thinking, teaching. It's about those messages exchanged back and forth kind of on the day-to-day, your style of communication. It has to do with travel, but usually it's more like this travel, like the things that we do kind of more consistently, or the shorter trips, like commutes, or even like short jaunts, that sort of thing. Also very much connected to commerce and marketing and that kind of thing as well. And when I was talking about like education and learning and teaching, that when we're talking about third house, it usually has to do with like the early learning environment. So elementary school, high school, early learning the basics, that sort of thing, right? And so that is the area of life where all this Aquarian energy is concentrated for you. And it's like the seeds that are being planted now have the capacity to grow into the magic beanstalk over the next couple weeks, 6 months, 20 years, sort of thing, right? So pay attention and intentionally plant these seeds, but also don't be afraid to experiment a little as well, because this is Aquarius that we're talking about. All right, so I'm going to leave that with you, Sagittarius, and hopefully you've listened to the questions as well, and you filter those through these third house themes that I just spoke to you about. Moving on, we're going to move to Scorpio now. So Scorpio, for you, this new moon is happening in your fourth house. This is where all this Aquarian energy is concentrated for you. And you are planting the seeds around the time of this new moon that have the potential to grow into, the magic beanstalk. You're pouring the miracle grow on the seedlings, in relation to fourth house themes. So this has to do with your place of living, your family, your sorry, I just had an interfering thought. Sorry. Your family, your place of living, your ancestral roots, your sense of emotional security. These are all, like, your home. These are all things that are fourth house related. And so you are planting some seeds now that have long-term implications, right? And think about those questions that I posed and filter them through these fourth house themes. But we can think about more practically, a couple of examples. And so, for example, you could be starting to think about some kind of like major renovation on your house. I don't know. You could be thinking about, the future in relation to your family. You could be thinking about maybe changing your place of living. There could be new scenarios involving, your parents coming up. It could be, there could be something involving your roots, your ancestry. Like, maybe you've done an ancestry DNA test and that's uncovered some interesting surprises or something like that. So, and there's many more examples. Those are just a few that I could give you. And, definitely kind of consider your own personal life experience and the fourth house themes and how that equates or that relates to this Aquarian energy of taking back your power and like a personal revolution in a sense, right? But also keeping in mind, holding that back pocket kind of thing that I mentioned, right? About not taking the rebellion to the point of self-sabotage sort of thing. Okay, so that's for you, Scorpio. It just occurred to me, my interrupted thought was I didn't know that if I gave Sagittarius any concrete examples, so I might go back at the end and do that. So anyway, Libra, we're moving on to you because this new moon is happening in your fifth house. And so this is where Aquarius sits for you. And so there is an opportunity here, Libra, for a personal revolution of sorts, for taking back your power in some way, for planting seeds of intention that can continue to grow into a magic beanstalk over the course of the next, couple of weeks, 6 months, 20 years, long term. And those seeds have to do with fifth house themes of your how you have fun in life, your sense of pleasure, what sparks joy for you, anything revolving around your creative self-expression, how you shine out in the world, and also very much having to do with children, right? Whether that be your own children that you are associated with, connected to, work with, issues around children and childbearing and child rearing and all of that, right? So those are all fifth house themes, and there's a real opportunity here to really set some intentions and plant some seeds and innovate in this area of life that has some long-term implications. All right, that's for you, Libra. Next, we're going to move to Virgo, where we have this new moon in Aquarius hitting your sixth house. So for you, Virgo, this is an opportunity to innovate, to take back your power, to plant the magic beans in your sixth house of work. So daily work, and that work can be paid or unpaid. But the sixth house also revolves around our daily routines. It revolves around our health, right? Illness, injury, health, health routines. And it also speaks to how we are in service. It's very much sixth house as well. So it's the sixth house is the day to day, the daily grind. And so there is this opportunity here to really switch things up, and do things and to innovate in this area, in a true Aquarian way. And thinking about how whatever you begin and experiment with around the time of this new moon has implications for, like your future vision for the next 2 weeks in the short term, for the next 6 months, for the next 20 years, right? So it's really good to spend some time contemplating what you want out of that area of life. All right. And so Virgo, let's just give you a couple of concrete examples here. I'm thinking things like, like how you spend your days, quite literally. And what you do on the day to day. Is that feeling sort of flat or frustrating or frazzled, or like it really needs to be, things really need to change there? Well, now's the perfect opportunity, right? And that can be like, because it's Aquarius, this can involve things like innovations on the technological front. It can involve things like health innovations, a completely different health routine. Like I think of, sometimes I think of Aquarius as, particularly in the sixth house, like alternative medicine. I think of, what else can I think of here when we're talking about sixth house? Changing your daily work, like quite literally your job, like making a job change to doing something that's, very different than what you're doing now. So those are some examples for you, Virgo. And we're going to move on to Leo now, where this Aquarius new moon is hitting your seventh house. So this is innovation and revolution, and potentially, sort of taking back your power in terms of the seventh house of one-to-one personal relationships. And so, the close personal relationships that you have, including, a marriage partner, a significant other, including business partnerships, also sometimes like close friends and family members. This speaks to contractual agreements and obligations as well when we're talking seventh house. And so something, planting some new seeds here that can grow into some magic, a magic beanstalk in the future, is really, very much speaks to the energy of this Aquarius stellium, and new moon in your seventh house. And so this can look like, doing relationship differently, right, than you have before, instigating new relationships, new people coming into your sphere, that you develop, personal relationships with, business partnerships, that kind of thing. This can have to do with negotiating new contracts that are, a bit sort of like futuristic or visionary or innovative in some way, or have to do with like maybe even sort of humanitarian kind of causes, that sort of thing. So those are some concrete examples I'm thinking of. This can also be Leo rising. It can have to do with your partner in some way, like, and what's happening in their sphere as well, right? That impacts you. So, okay, so that's for you, Leo. I'm going to move on to Cancer next, because Cancer, this is happening in your 8th house. And so for you, this new moon in Aquarius and the stellium of planets in Aquarius is this opportunity to plant those seeds of intention, right? And to pour on the miracle grow in relation to other people's resources. So this is like money that comes to you in indirect ways, like from, it can be clients, but it can be like inheritance, or any money that is connected to other people or other institutions even. So taxes, insurance, debt, mortgages, scholarships, bursaries, payouts, anything like that, right? So this is an opportunity for planting new seeds there, for innovating in that area of life, for really taking back your power. Maybe kind of in that sense, this could be like taking control of debt, for example, right? Like that's just one example I can think of. But the eighth house, it's deep, and it's the natural home of Scorpio. And a phrase that comes to mind here is "still waters run deep," right? But the thing is this house has to do with other people's resources in a sense, like I just mentioned, but it also speaks to issues around mortality, which is where the inheritance wills, that kind of thing piece comes in, right? But issues around mortality, this whole cycle of transformation, and it's also where we dig deep psychologically, right? And it's sort of like skeletons in the closet, or our deep psychological kind of issues, right? Depth psychology is very eighth house. And so all of these themes can be triggered at the time of this new moon. But for you, be intentional about it. Think about your own life, what's going on, which of these themes applies. And that is where you want to plant these seeds of intention, and to really ultimately, work towards growing that magic beanstalk kind of thing that I keep referring to. So that's for you, Cancer. Next, we're going to move to Gemini, where we've got the ninth house, where this new moon is happening. And for you, Gemini, that is very much about what we call the higher mind. So it speaks to like your philosophy, your worldview, your belief system, your ideology. It speaks to teaching and learning, and in this case, opposite the third house, it's more about like at a higher level, college, university, anything sort of beyond the basics, right? It can be about publishing, getting your message out that way. It has to do with foreign cultures, foreign people and places, and what you can learn from them. Also about travel, just as the third house is, but in this case, it's more about like places you don't go very often, or like long distance travel, that kind of thing. So for you, Gemini, all of these themes are possibilities at the time of this new moon. So you think about your own kind of personal situation, you apply those questions that I posed earlier, and think about, how you can intentionally plant seeds here, seeds that are futuristic, that are visionary, that are maybe feel a bit liberating or rebellious, but not to the point of self-sabotage, right? So doing things differently, and that those, planting those seeds will have implications for the short term. So like the 2-week cycle, right? Moon cycle, but also for, think about like, what do you want life to look like in 6 months from now? What do you want life to look like in 20 years from now, particularly as it pertains to this area of life? So that's for you, Gemini. And we're going to move to Taurus now. So Taurus, for you, this big old new moon in Aquarius with all these planets in Aquarius is hitting your 10th house, which is a very public house, right? It's the top of the chart. It is about your personal ambitions, your public reputation and persona, your career, your vocation, the legacy you wish to leave, your relationship to authority figures and your own authority. These kinds of things are very 10th house. And so I invite you to consider the questions that I posed and filter them through these 10th house themes, and thinking about what seeds of intention do you want to plant. You want to plant your magic beans in this 10th house area of life, and then water them over time. And like, what do you want that to look like what do you want that to look like in 2 weeks, in 6 months, in 20 years? So are you, thinking about planting some seeds in terms of your career that you're hoping to grow into a magic beanstalk, and thinking in terms of Aquarian themes of technology and innovation and liberation and maybe humanitarian sort of causes, that kind of thing, right? All the stuff that I spoke about earlier. And so I'm trying to think if there's any other example that I can think of to give you, but it's something going on in that very public house. You know, you could be getting some recognition for something unique, right? Or that could be the hope with planting these seeds of intention here for you, Taurus, as well. All right, next we're going to move to Aries. So Aries, for you, this is happening in your 11th house. So this new moon is hitting your 11th house. And this is the sort of natural home of Aquarius, right? The 11th house revolves around themes of friendship, of the group, the collective, networks, the internet, those kinds of connections. It's very much about your vision for the future, you know, your hopes and dreams for the future, and the people that can help you get there, that can help you make gains, so to speak. And so for you, Aries, you're planting seeds of intention here that you're hoping to grow over the long term, right? And like that will happen in increments. Where do you want, pardon me, what do you want this to look like, this area of life, over the next 2 weeks, 6 months, 20 years? And there is maybe an Aquarian element to this. So connecting with people via the internet, for example, you know, maybe joining some cause that you are really feel strongly about. This could be really setting some long-term vision for the future, quite literally, with the 11th house, and thinking about, like, thinking outside of the box, right, as to what that could look like for you. So that's for you, Aries, and then we're going to move to Pisces last but not least. So Pisces, for you, this new moon in Aquarius is happening in your 12th house, which is sort of your natural comfort zone, right? Your natural home. And so you're planting these seeds of intention, and it could be very much like behind the scenes, because the 12th house speaks to what goes on behind closed doors, the subconscious, dream life, your connection to the unseen, your connection to, you know, spirituality. The 12th house speaks to sort of endings and losses, and it also has to do with literal, like, sometimes places that are tucked away from the world. So things like, you know, the examples that always come to mind here are things like hospitals and hospices and prisons and long-term care facilities and spiritual retreat centers, rehab facilities, you know, anything like that. And that, like, I don't want people to freak out when I say that. Like this doesn't mean like that's, you know, you're going to end up in one of those places. Don't think that. I mean, there's always possibilities, but it's like, you know, this can have to do with your work. This can have to do with other people in your life, you know. But the point I'm trying to make here is that there's something going on here where, you know, you're being kind of asked to plant some seeds of intention here and grow those seeds over time. So maybe it's like a new spiritual practice that you are embarking on, or you're interested and curious about it. And so you're going to plant some seeds of intention, right? And what that could look like over the long term for you. Or there is some kind of self-sabotaging behavior that you're aware of, that you are going to take steps to tackle in new and innovative ways, potentially. Or it's like, you know, okay, so the pandemic naturally comes to mind, and, you know, this could be like being separated from loved ones that are in, like, you know, hospital or something. And so there's like having to kind of get creative for how maybe using technology to communicate. I don't know. That's just like an example that kind of comes to mind. But there's shorter term things here, and then there's longer term things that are going on in terms of these 12th house themes as well. So that's for you, Pisces. Definitely listen to the questions that I posed, because that'll really give you something to work with. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I want to just circle back real quick to Sagittarius and potentially to Gemini, because I think those two signs, I might have not given you some concrete examples, and I tried to intentionally do that in this video. So Sag, for you in the third house, like this could be like you're learning something new, quite literally, like from the ground up, right? You're starting to learn something new, and or you intend to learn something new. So those seeds are being planted around the time of this new moon, or it could be like a very real example I could think of is like new teachers. You're going to teach elementary school or high school, right? And that's happening in a new and different way. Like I went to teachers college, and when we did our practicums, we went into schools, which I'm sure is still happening, but there's also the online component that's very new, right? And very Aquarian. So, there's that potentially. There is like online, like maybe you're somebody who owns a business, and because of the current circumstance, you are having to pivot and do more online things, like pivot your business to online rather than bricks and mortar kind of thing. So there's that potential, example for you as well. And that's for you, Sag. And then Gemini, I don't think I gave you a concrete example either. I can't remember, but just in case, I don't think I did. So things like maybe you want to start a new like university program, and again, like it's a similar theme to Gemini, because it's on that same axis of teaching and learning and thoughts and ideas and perspectives and all of that, and also travel. But so it's like again, there's this online component that is happening more than we've ever seen before, and there's innovation has to happen there. So it could have something to do with that. It could have something to do with I don't know, something that just popped into my head was publishing something, and you're going to do it in like ebook form maybe, or you're doing a book launch but it has to be online, or you are an armchair traveler these days because you can't literally go somewhere. So how can you experience foreign people and places without physically traveling right now? What could that look like? I don't know. Those are just some examples that came to mind, and I didn't want to leave you out, so I thought I would mention that. All right, so that's a real long video. Once again, I got this new camera. Well, it's actually a new phone that I take the videos on, and it's just like has a lot of memory, so I tend to blather on longer than I probably should. But I will put the timestamps in there for you. These are exciting times. Let me know how things are playing out for you. Okay, take good care, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.